So, welcome to episode 2 of the Let's Talk Disability series. I'm Jackie Carter. I'm a professor in statistical literacy in the University of Manchester, and I'm also the EDI academic lead for disability. And the purpose of these in conversation pieces is to have two people speak about lived experience of disability. And so we have Laura here, who's going to introduce herself in a minute, who will speak about her lived experience of disability as a PGR student. And I have Colette, who's the Vice President for Research at the University of Manchester, who is one of the senior leaders at the university. And the aim of these conversations is to be in dialogue about disability in order that we can learn more about what it means to be a PGR student or a member of staff, both academic or professional services, so that we can understand better what it means to be disabled at the University of Manchester. I'm going to start by asking Laura if you can introduce yourself, and then I'll do the same for Colette. So anything that you'd like the listeners to know about you, your role, and why you're sitting in this chair today, please, Laura.
So I'm Laura Howard. I'm a third-year PGR in Archaeology. I'm also co-chair of the Disabled Staff Network at Manchester, and I co-run the Disabled PGR group here. So I have physical and cognitive disabilities because of a brain injury. I was in a little bit of an accident when I was 22. Because of that, I have chronic pain and fatigue, and on the cognitive side, I have trouble with memory and comprehension. Luckily, neither skills are needed in a PhD. It also affects my speech, so it's a bit like Malcolm and Wise, all the right words, just not necessarily in the right order. So if at any point, Colette, you can't understand me, please let me know. I promise I won't get offended. It also has an effect on my ability to moderate swearing, which always makes situations like this quite interesting. And I became involved in activism for disabled PGRs at Manchester because when I joined the university, I felt like I was the only disabled PGR here, and I was facing a lot of barriers that my non-disabled peers weren't facing. So when we got the opportunity to start the Disabled PGR group, it was suddenly like, oh my God, there's 50 of us, and we're all sort of facing the same issues. So from there, it felt like, well, we can build on this. Can we actually use our voice collectively to try and get some changes made? And since then, I've been mithering Jackie pretty much non-stop. It's resulted in me being here today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Laura. I don't see it as mithering. I see it working together collaboratively on issues that need addressing. Thank you. Colette, could I ask you to do the same, please?
Yes, I'm Colette Fagan. I'm Vice President for Research, and that includes looking after our postgraduate researchers and our research staff, as well as our broader research strategy. I'm a member of the senior team, which is the executive team of the organisation, working with our President and Vice-Chancellor. I'm Professor in the School of Social Science, and a lot of my research over my career has been on issues of equality and diversity, primarily through the lens of gender inequalities and looking at the situation in different organisations, different countries. And I am a member of the university's EDI group, which is leading the implementation of our strategy with a sponsorship of Black and minority ethnic staff, which was, there was a number of roles, and I chose this one and was asked to do it.
Thank you very much, both. So the purpose, as I say, of this conversation is really to uncover, to give a voice to disabled staff and students, but to uncover not just the barriers that are faced, but also the strengths that we bring to those roles. So I'm going to hand over to you both to have the conversation. I'll jump in at subsequent points. But Laura, over to you. What is it you'd like to start by sharing with Colette?
So as you were saying, there are a lot of strengths to being a disabled PGR. For instance, I spent sort of 6 years rotting in a bed in my parents' home, being looked after by them, before I was referred to a neurological clinic and they got me back up and running. So the worst has already happened to me. So I'm hugely resilient, which is great on a PhD because everyone's PhD goes wrong all the time. I hope that's true and it's not just me. But my attitude is very much, as long as I'm upright and my bra's on, it's a good day. As well, because I have to adapt constantly to my body, I'm very adaptable when things go wrong. I'm also really surprisingly good at planning. Because I constantly have to have my brain on, right, my medication, need to keep that sorted, I need to keep doctor's appointments sorted, I need to make sure I've sent all the right stuff off to the benefits office. I'm already good with planning on the PhD, and because I can't leave things to the last minute because I don't know how I'm going to feel at the last minute, I'm never sort of submitting rushed work. It's always very carefully thought through. I think another strength is, well, not memory, because I forgot what I was going to say now. It'll come back in a second. Sorry, it's like a Windows computer. Yeah. I've got a very different perspective as well than sort of other PGRs on the course. And because of that, because I work weirdly in decolonial practice, it's had an effect on that because I'm already very EDI aware. So there are a lot of strengths that I think we do bring that apply to a PhD. There are some barriers as well, though. There are some things we face that our non-disabled PGRs don't. So things like supervisor relationships. When you first meet your supervisor, you want to impress them. You've picked them for a reason. You want them to think they've not made a mistake. And you don't want them to feel like you're a problem PGR who just moans all the time. So it's difficult to sort of explain to them, oh, I can't do this, I'm not feeling too good, or I can't go to this event. As well, it's difficult to engage in the PGR community, which is actually what led to our disabled PGR group. So, for instance, in archaeology, our seminars are at 5 o'clock, followed by networking. I'm done by 4. My body's give up. I need to be on my couch and not speaking to people. So research seminars are out, conferences. I recently went to a conference in Belfast. It was a 4-day conference, went really well, but then I needed a week off downtime. As well, a lot of us are self-funded because I don't want to generalise, but a lot of us in the group don't look like great applicants. So take me, for instance, I had my accident right at the beginning of a master's I was doing in Sheffield. At the time, we were told we anticipate that master's students would be prepared for all eventualities. So there was no support for me. So I managed to get a pass, but it was barely a pass, which good news, disability support has improved. Well done. I then spent 6 years, as I said, rotting in a bed. So when I rocked up to the University of Manchester with me barely a pass and me nothing on my CV, they pretty much slammed the door in my face. Now my supervisor, he really believed in my project and he did everything to try and get me in. He had me write reports and how my disability affected me. But at the end of the day, I was super impressed that I'd relearned to make toast for myself about burning my house down, but it didn't look impressive on a CV. So I ended up having to do a second master's, which went really well, did great. I'm on the PhD now, but I am a little bit that I had to spend 10 grand to prove that I'm as capable. And it has a knock-on effect in funding and other members of our group where it's took them 5 years instead of 3 to complete a bachelor's because they've had time off for treatment. Similarly, they've not got any experience. So a lot of us are self-funded. And that means we can't really afford to pay for things like conferences. I've rambled on a lot there, haven't I, Colette?
You haven't rambled. You've actually been quite organised, which is quite hard in live conversations for anybody. So well done. And I think the points you've drawn out are really self-reflective about resilience, adaptability, building in that buffer rather than doing it just in time, having to think through your project in different ways. These are all things that every postgraduate and academic needs because of the nature of the work we do. So you are pulling on your strengths while also making it clear it's taken you a long and arduous journey to be able to recognise and develop those strengths for academic work. So a lot of people should be very much in awe of you, Laura.
Oh, thank you. I need to take you home and introduce you to my mum. She'd be made up if you said that to her. But that is, I've just remembered now, the other strength is, I I didn't need to be told when I started what my weaknesses were. I knew I was going to be struggling with writing. I knew I'd struggle with journal articles. So I knew what workshops I needed. So when it came time to my first panel meeting, it was very short because I'd already addressed all my problems. I knew that I had a lot of difficulty remembering the bones. So I went into the lab twice a week just to refresh myself. And I continued to do that. So yeah, so it was just another little strength I've remembered.
So you're having to work harder and to compensate for weaknesses in what you can bring that you've recognised. And again, that is really incredible. It does make me wonder why you chose an academic pathway.
Yeah, it's a little bit of an interesting path. So I always loved archaeology, but as you might have noticed from my accent, I'm from a council estate, and I felt like heritage was something you did if you had money. So I did forensics for my undergrad because I was like, well, that's going to have a job in it. But then I had my accident, and it was a very distinct moment. I got a letter from DWP saying, we accept that you're disabled. Welcome to the scrap heap of life. And it just felt like I was done. So when I was admitted to the Walton Centre, they were fantastic. We did it wasn't just physio, it was CBT therapy and stuff, and they gave me a goal to work on. And for the first time in my life, I had a little bit of money and time. And I was like, well, I've always loved heritage. I'm going to go and do this. And as well, because I'm quite petty, when they knocked me back, I was like, oh, you knocked me back. I'm not leaving.
So another key element of the jigsaw of success in academia is choosing something you have a burning passion, great interest, don't mind working really hard and quite slowly to see the results. So that is inspiring to hear that you still love archaeology after all this time.
I know, it's great. It's and it's one of the most welcoming, I'd say, SALC for disabled PGRs. I think there's just a general attitude of it's been there 10,000 years, what's one more day going to count? So it's very relaxed. So I actually, because it's osteology, I also work in the biomedical school because that's where the tissue bank is, and it's completely different there. So my supervisor's completely different attitudes, which has worked out great for me because one is basically lying down all the time, incredibly relaxed, and the other is very so on it, the one in the biomedical school. But yeah, I'd say in general, SALC, it's very relaxed, it's very welcoming, very aware of EDI.
Can I jump in, Laura? First of all, to say what SALC is, so the School of Arts, Languages and Cultures at the University of Manchester, but also maybe to pick up a little bit around the role of supervisors. You know, you've talked about having very different but very supportive supervisors. Is there anything that you would want to sort of elicit further from that role of a supervisor to a disabled PGR like yourself?
One of the big barriers, I think, is that you really don't want to disappoint them. So I do lived experience of disability training for different departments, and I put up a photograph of me looking disgraceful. You'd be able to tell what I'd eaten that week because it's encrusted on my pyjamas. And I do that because that's a representation of the person I don't want my supervisor to see. I don't want him to see me. I want him to see me as an academic. And even though he is lovely and could not, genuinely, he's got 3 disabled PGRs and there's a reason for that. But still, I have a lot of difficulty talking to him about the barriers I face because I don't want to let him down. And I don't want his view to change of me from academic to, do you know when you have a family party and it's 7 p.m. and you have to put your gran in the taxi and you'll go, oh, it's time to go home. I don't want to be that person. And it's really difficult to get past that barrier and talk to him about it. And I know from experience as well, some of our PGRs who are more able to talk to their supervisors, it's not through malice, they just don't know what to do. So the stock answer is to go to DAS. But it is a difficult one. I guess sort of practical advice I'd give is if you're a supervisor, reread DAS reports monthly because you're going to forget. It's only natural. It happened to me in my first year. So with the physical disabilities, because you can see it, I've got a crutch. If I sent an email saying I can't come in today, which I hated doing, I'm in a lot of pain, then they'd be like, fine, get it, not a problem. But I was working with another supervisor on bones, and she was sending me like journal articles to read to refresh my knowledge. And then when she's asking me about them the next week, I'm saying, yeah, the journal article, the one with the words on the paper. Yeah. Because my memory just couldn't retain that information. And she was getting frustrated. She wasn't being horrible or anything. But we had a panel meeting in my first year, my first panel meeting, and my external examiner asked, how does your disability impact you? And I just brought up, I've got the cognitive issues, it affects my memory and my comprehension. And just having that reminder, it completely changed their attitude. But yeah, so reread, especially for those hidden disabilities, it'll just help it sink in. Another thing that I did that you can ask your PGR maybe to do if they feel comfortable is I wrote down a list of everything I needed to do as a PhD student, from conferences to reading journal articles, right down to just sitting in a chair for extended periods of time. And then I wrote down every way my disability would impact that area, and then strategies for things I could do to combat that. So if they're comfortable, maybe do that with them. And just let them know that you're there. Don't do it in the sympathetic head tilt or you poor little soldier way. Just be like, I understand that there are barriers that you're going to face. If there's anything I can do, please feel free to talk to me.
So I think there's two things there. There's a lot of things, but two practical things. One is, DAS may be under-resourced, and I think that is something for the disability team to pick up with the EDI group.
I should say what DAS is.
For disability advice for staff and students. Because one of the things as a postgraduate supervisor is you have to be able to signpost your students to a number of sources, partly because the supervisor is primarily there for academic supervision, and some of our staff who make excellent academic supervisors are not going to be equipped to identify early onset of mental ill health and well-being, or financial issues, or complex disabilities which range across the whole spectrum of needs. So we've got a tricky role here at the university, which is equipping people to do the core bit that they can do, which is supervise in a specialised area, while also helping you navigate the range of services for specialist support across, as I said, a number of welfare and well-being issues. But what we do also we have expectations on our supervisors, and we do have a toolkit about what's expected on both sides of the relationship / contract. And what we could do specifically here is ensure that how disability is addressed in that toolkit is done properly. And I think your idea of, or not your idea, the thing that you have used about mapping out where your particular obstacles are in relation to the things we expect as part of a standard academic path. Not everybody does them anyway, but conferences, etc., is a really practical thing we can do. Because most people find it easier when they've got a practical task in front of them to start that conversation and to understand and avoid the their approach through to the, sorry, you can't see that on a radio, frozen face because it's a rabbit in the headlights who doesn't know what to do.
Yes.
And this comes up with disability. It can come up with being a part of an underrepresented group with others. So it's not specific to disability, but I think there are things we could do around the toolkit to open that conversation and to help raise awareness with the supervisor about your specific needs as a postgraduate, but also the process, the wider issues around different disabilities.
Thank you. I'm going to come back on that to both of you as well, because Laura, you're here today. I've disclosed I have disabilities. You've shared that you have disabilities, but not everybody feels comfortable doing that. So I think one of the issues that we face as a university, as do many organisations, is how to support everybody, regardless of whether or not they're able and willing to share that they have a disability. So I don't know if you've any thoughts on that. I mean, certainly the work you've done around the Disabled Staff Network and the PGR group as part of that. Is there anything you'd want to say about how we can support, how we can be disability inclusive, regardless of whether people share their disability?
I think if you just, it might be a bit simplistic, but when you're designing things, so we'll say these networking events, go with the thought process of someone is going to turn up, is going to face this barrier, someone's going to have difficulty getting into the room for this reason. Try and cover your bases as much as possible there. As well, make sure you've got so a big issue we've had is report and support. So that's been with the staff network and as well with our postgraduates. They feel like there isn't a place they can turn to when they do face these barriers, when they have these negative experiences. Unfortunately, we've had some disabled PGRs face abuse and harassment, and they don't really trust the university in these circumstances. And it's very difficult to get rid of that mindset. I think the Disabled Staff Network and the Disabled PGR group have been really good at sort of helping people to disclose, because it's peer support. And there's an instant sense when you join those groups that, okay, these people get it, they understand what I'm going through, and I'm safe disclosing to them, and I can tell them what's happened to me, and they're not going to tell anyone else, or if I do need help, they're going to be there to help me. And we've had that a few times. So again, with that person who was abused on campus, we managed to set up a series of meetings with security to address that. And now the buying us all panic bracelets, where you press it and security runs to your location. So yeah, having those peer group, a few people have said it's been a lifesaver for them. And it's a place where it's one of the first places they felt safe talking about everything that affects them. So I would say maybe signpost them to that. Make sure you've got a strong report and support system, so when people do have these issues. So one of the major ones we have is line managers disregarding staff's DAS plans. And when they report it, nothing gets done. This is what they're reporting back to me. So they just give up. And they don't want to then talk about other barriers they're facing because they feel it's going to have a knock-on effect on their career. Sorry, that all went very dark.
No, it's unpacking and being realistic about what an organisation can do in steps. And I think there were, again, if I can just partition. So I think Jackie's question was about undisclosed, unseen disabilities, which is very welcome a solution on how you handle that as an organisation. But the points that you were making were about not disclosing when you've hit barriers because you've given up. And so this is how my brain works most of the time. So the group that you've talked about is about that collective mentoring and coaching, where you can, you've got someone to turn to talk to without there being a fear of repercussions. And if that group really functions well, they also know how to work for university in terms of both the official routes, but the workarounds of how you escalate to the right person. So that's why having staff groups as one form of mentoring and coaching is really important. The other, I find it hard as a member of a senior team and as a sociologist, is when you unpack people feel or they've heard and they're already positioning themselves. And then we've got two things to do. We've got the feelings, emotions, trust, which is hard stuff to shift, and a lot of us don't find it as comfortable as driving other things. But not more importantly, as a sociologist, I have to think of the structure as well, which is this is one kind of data that is telling you there's something about the structure people don't understand because we've not explained it properly or because it's not working. So I can put my hand on my heart and say, I think our support and report service works really well because I've seen the resourcing, I've seen the people in it. We get annual reports on who uses it and so forth. It's not perfect, but I trust that system and I think it's got better. So for me, it's how do we get the staff group, among others, to understand that most organisations are going to let people down at different times, but there are ways through, and the journey isn't always as painful as it may feel if we're relying on memories or other people's experiences, which are very true and valid, but things may have moved on and we need to be able to get that message through. The second bit I find hard here as well is when people want to use, this is the weak bit of the report and support service, which is where people want to report unintributed about something that happened somewhere in the university and there's no detail to go on. So our goal is to really try and get people into a space where they know and trust it's a confidential service, but we need to know a little bit more detail to be able to do a targeted intervention. I got a sense of where there are hotspots for, in my other hats, looking after research, for research misconduct. So I try and work. They're very small, but they are quite isolated. But it means you can do something effective rather than me trying to train every single academic or my team to train them. So it's creating, with the help of the staff group, a confidence to be able to say, even if it's to say it happened in this school, even better if we know the department, and if appropriate, to move into the more formal stage where it's actually, and it was this person on this date. There are different interventions for both, but we can try and improve the environment that you have to study and work in.
I think you've uncovered an awful lot through that short part of this conversation. I often think that, the best system will be where we don't get any reporting. Okay, so we know that we do it where we're inclusive, we're trustworthy, people know where to go to get the support. And I know you're doing a lot of that behind the scenes yourself, Laura, so I know because we've talked about some of those things. And certainly on this In Conversation series, it's good to touch on, but without losing sight of some of the really good practice that's going on at the university, across the university, but also at local level. So I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing in that space. And having safe spaces, having safe spaces that people know that they can go and be listened to. And again, one of the purposes of this is having a voice for people through a disability lens particularly, but of course we're looking at this intersectionally. So I think we do get things wrong. I think we have to admit as an institution we get things wrong, but I think we're also on a journey together where we're trying to improve the lived experience of people who have disabilities. So it's really helpful that you're bringing these circumstances to our attention. So moving on, we've unpacked a lot. Is there anything else either of you want to touch on before we move on to the final question that I posed for you both? that you think the listeners would appreciate hearing?
I think there has definitely been an increase in trust since we started the disabled PGR group, because people have a name and a face and they know where to turn. So Jackie, you come to several focus groups. We've had Stephen Pearce come to several focus groups. Like I said, we've met with security, we've met with DAS. And because we've been able to talk to these people and they've been able to explain their position to them, it has definitely built up more of a relationship of trust. It would be great if that could improve, just because I'm a bit knackered now. Just because I'm a bit tired.
I suppose I'm going to bounce that one to Jackie in terms of thinking about the support that is provided and can be provided. So I can see why people come to you with your skill and empathy, but you shouldn't have to do it all yourself. And that's actually something we try and teach about leadership anyway, of self at every career stage. Is sometimes it's about being able to pass it on, but you've got to be able to pass it on to somebody. So I think that's a little bit about our disability advisory advice support service plus, where you can be the gateway, for want of a better word, but some of the other things should not land on you. I'm probably telling you what you already know, but there is a hardship fund that you might be able to tap into for some of the extra expenses or time that you've been spending on this project.
Thanks, Colette. I think you're right to bounce it to me, and hopefully you'll be reassured that one of the things I have asked Laura and the other two co-chairs of the Disabled Staff Network is to quantify the amount of time that they're currently giving to these activities, so that we have an evidence base to see the amount of support that's being requested. And if we can't meet it, then we need to have conversations about what that means. So we're talking to each other, and I hope you feel supported, Laura. But absolutely, you need to look after your own health, because ultimately, if you become tired, then the whole stack of cards falls apart. So let's move to the final two questions. As at the end of these conversation pieces, I ask each of my guests to ask the other a question. So Laura, I've given you the question there. So if I could ask you to start by asking Colette the question, and then she'll reciprocate and ask you one.
So Colette, what one thing will you commit to do as a result of this conversation?
I will commit to go back to our postgraduate research team on the broader area of postgraduate research support. I mentioned the supervisory toolkit, and I think there's a way of integrating with the support of, without creating more work for you, but drawing on the work you've done already and Jackie's insights and oversight of this, how we can integrate this as part of all the other things, but equally legitimate, that we expect our supervisors to do. More generally, we have a postgraduate researcher policy and wellbeing support, and I know from earlier conversations this year that one of the areas which they feel they are not doing as well on as others is some of the disability needs of some students, postgraduate students. So I think that's a bit of the organisation I can work with to help improve things for postgraduate researchers with the team who are responsible for making the environment appropriate for you. All the other things I'll leave with Jackie.
Thank you, Colette. And then over to you to ask Laura the question that I've asked.
What one thing would make a difference to your experience as a University of Manchester postgraduate researcher?
So I'll start, by the way, because I feel like I've slagged UOM off for half an hour. It is a very welcoming place generally for disabled people, especially PGRs. And the PGR journey, it can actually be really suited to disabled people because there is that flexibility. Now, this might be a bit vague, but the one thing that would make a difference would be to take away the fight. Everything is a constant fight, fighting to be included in the PGR community, fighting to advance your career by going to conferences, fighting to get the support you need. And it sort of feels like it's strange because I have less energy and yet I have to do more. And this analogy might not make sense, but recently me and my friend Kat, who is a non-disabled PGR, we both helped our other friend move house because we both drive. And it feels like she's turned up in a brand new people carrier, 7 seats, fresh off the lot. And I've turned up in a 1984 Ford Cortina with like 3 wheels and smoke coming out of it. And they've gone, right, we're going to put all the books and heavy stuff in Laura's car. Don't worry if it doesn't fit. We'll just start strapping stuff to the roof and then we'll all climb in. Kat, you take some duvets and pillows. And I feel like I'm stood there going, what are you doing? My crap car cannot take this. I'm falling apart. I'm like the car at the end of the Blues Brothers with everything falling off. Why is it all being strapped to me? I would say, though, it doesn't feel like that the majority of the time. I do feel, especially since we started the PGR group included, but a lot of us do feel like, why do we have to fight so much? So if you could take that away, one thing that might be helpful for that is just having a name and a face. Just being like, you're disabled PGR, you got a problem, go see Dave.
We should have that.
Thank you, Laura. Well, thank you both of you very much for today's very open, honest, in-depth and challenging conversation, which is actually what I want to get out of these conversations. So I'm going to say thank you and goodbye for now.